So yesterday we learned the definition of an irrational number. Can someone raise their hand? Who can tell me? Okay, so an irrational number is a number that cannot be written as a fraction. And Refugio told us in a 7th grade definition, right? What does that mean? It means a non-repeating never-ending decimal. Because that doesn't really sometimes click with our brains. If I say an irrational number, oh, don't you remember? It's a number that can't be written as a fraction. Well, that doesn't really help me. I don't like it when definitions of words use the word in them or are negative. It cannot be written as a fraction. How do I know if it can't be written as a fraction? So they're non-repeating, never-ending decimals, like pi. 0.123456789 ... There's a pattern that it follows, but it never repeats and it never ends. So it's irrational. Refugio.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
For the pi thing, how would you spell that? Because it was like part of
P-I.
Just P-I?
Yep.
Well, on my homework I spelled it wrong.
You're fine. However, there are some special ones. For example, ladies and gentlemen, if we go through and I asked you to mark rational or irrational for 70 seconds, which one would you mark? Rational. Because it's a fraction. Duh. What about 0? Rational. Because can you write it as a fraction?
Yes.
Over 1. We didn't talk about this.
I was about to ask you what that was.
So we're going to talk about that. There are also other irrational numbers. So there's a second part to this. Yes, I understand that if it's a non-repeating, non-terminating, never-ending, let's look. Negative 2.24, 224, 2224, 22224, 222222, right? Is there a pattern to this problem? Yes, but does it repeat? Is it the same every time? No, so this would be irrational. There's another way to write these special numbers. Maybe it's written as a decimal. That's one option. The other way is using a special symbol. The other way of making an irrational number is using a special symbol. Does anyone know what that symbol's called? Carlos, what is it? Square root. The act is a square root. This is the square root of 10. The symbol all by itself has an even fancier name. The symbol itself, all by itself, is a radical sign. But we say it's the square root of 10, or a radical 10. Right? We have to get used to both words. Radical, it's also a square root. Depending on the circumstance, we'll be using it as a square root. But I need you to understand that if I say radical, it means the same thing. And do you know what a square root does? Carlos, what does a square root do? Good. A square root or a radical, this is the symbol, is the inverse What does inverse mean? Opposite of squaring. And what Carlos said was, doesn't it mean that it's like a number times a number equals that number? 100%. But let's use descriptors, right? If 4 squared is 16, the square root of 16 is 4. It's the opposite of squaring. 5 times 5 is 25. So the square root of 25 is 5. 10 times 10 is 100. So radical 100 is 10. It's not dividing by 2. It's trying to figure out what times itself squared equals that number. Most radicals are irrational. Does it say all? No, it says most. Sorry. It does not say all radicals. It says most. Out of 1 through 150. Out of 150 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? 1 to 150, there are only 12 that are rational. The others are irrational.
Irrational? Are you talking about 7?
Right? I'm going to give you a list that I want you to memorize. And we're going to number them. I'm going to give you a list of 12 numbers I want you to memorize, okay? So here we go. We're going to do the first number, and then underneath, next to it, we're going to put the second number, and then we're going to put the third number, right? And then the fourth. These are not the numbers I want you to memorize. Okay, you're going to memorize a list of 12 numbers. Out of 150 numbers, I only want you to remember these 12. Can you do that? Does that sound doable? Out of 150 numbers, all you're responsible for knowing is 12 numbers. And again, they're not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? It's a little more difficult than that. The first number I want you to memorize in this list is the number 1. The next number I want you to memorize is the number 4. So the first one is 1, the second one is 4, the third one is 9. See if you can figure out the pattern.
14 is the next one.
Close. The next one is 16. The fifth number I want you to memorize is 25. The sixth number you need to memorize is 36. The seventh number in this is 49. Christopher, did you figure it out? What's the next one? 64, then what? 81, then what? 100. Do you know the next one? Close. 121. And the last one? 144. Christopher, how'd you figure out those numbers? You squared them, right? 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 squared is 16. 5 squared is 25. 6 squared is 36. 7 squared is 49. 8 squared is 64. 9 squared is 81. 10 squared is 100. 11 squared is 121. And 12 squared is 14. If you memorize those numbers, you're good to go. These are called perfect squares. Any other number, if it's the square root of anything else, like the square root of 5, is it in my list of perfect squares? No. So it's irrational. The square root of 10. Come on. Is the square root of 10 up there? No. So it's what? Irrational. What about 2/7? Is that rational or irrational? Because it's a fraction. What about negative square root of 100? Is it on my list? So it's rational. What about 12?
Irrational.
Can you make 12 into a fraction? Rational. What about 144 over 36? But it's the square root of that. Well, look. Are those numbers on my list? 144, 36. Rational. What about 7 over 2? Rational. 10.3. You can make it into a fraction. 16.5. Radical 16.5. Is it on my list? 16 is, but is 16.5? What about 0 over 8? What about negative square root 87? Is 87 on my list? So what is it? What about radical 9? Is 676 on my list? No, but ladies and gentlemen, I only stopped at 144. So let's talk about if there's a number that's not on our list, it's too big. It's way, 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 way big. Right? Sorry, I'm looking at the time to see how much we have. To put it in your calculator. So this is for a school calculator. If you have your own calculator, get it out so you learn how to do it on your own. But on a school calculator, these are the sequence of buttons you press. You press the second button. It's literally the button that has the word second or the symbol second. Then you press the X squared button. Then you type the number, whatever number it is. Then you press enter or equals. And especially on the yellow calculators or the school calculators, lots of times you have to press the conversion button. To change it to a decimal if necessary. 676. So here we go. We're pressing the green second button right there. Right? Then I'm pressing the X squared button because see up above it in green how there's the square root sign, the radical sign? The green button gets me to those symbols. So you should have the symbol on your calculator. Some of you will have a parentheses with it. That's okay. Then you type the number, which was 676. I'm going to press enter, which is down here. Did it work? 26 times 26 gives us a product of 700 or 676. Try square root of 532. 532. You just press the number. 676. Your square root button's here. I don't remember. What did I say?
532.
532. So you press the green second button, or some of you don't follow these procedures, but this is school calculator. Green second button, x squared, to get your radical sign, 532. I'm going to press enter, and I get something crazy. So I have to go to the next one, which is the conversion button. Is this rational or irrational? Irrational. It does not repeat and it does not end. So the square root of 532 is irrational. You press the number, 676, and you press your square root button, which is right there. All right, so I'm going to show you what we're going to do today. Because I can teach you how to do this in your head. All right? Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to tell you without a calculator that radical 50, the answer is approximately 7.1. Without doing any math. No calculator, no nothing. So here's how it happens. Are you ready? Write this down. This is the thought process you need to think about. I know that radical 50 is irrational. Why is radical 50 irrational? It's not in my list, right? My only numbers that work are 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, 144. From 0 to 150, there are only 12 numbers that work. All of those other numbers are going to be irrational. Here's how I know it's about 7.1. Here's my reasoning. The number 50 is between 49 and 64. Why did I pick those two numbers?
Because those are the closest to 50?
Yeah, they're in my list, right? So I look at my list of what are called perfect squares, and 50 fits between 49 and 64. So that tells me that radical 50 is between radical 49 and radical 64. I know that 50 fits right in here. And I know that radical 50 then would fit between these two. But you guys, is there a better way? Do I go around saying radical 49? Can you simplify that? Can you make it easier?
We can make probably 49, 50, and 65. 64, 65.
Radical 50 is between, what is the square root of 49? 7. And what is the square root of 64? 8. So I know radical 50 is between 7 and 8. Because radical 50 fits nicely between radical 49 and radical 64. Those are my two numbers in my list. And radical 49, the square root of 49 is 7. And the square root of 64 is 8. So I know radical 50 is nicely tucked between these two numbers. If I was going to graph it, I'd put 7 here, and I'd put 8 here. But why did I pick 7.1? I mean, I just guessed. Maybe it really is 7.008. I don't know. I just guessed. I estimated. Why did I say it's so close to 7? Why, Lily?
The actual answer is
7.07. Okay, but I don't want to use a calculator. I'm just estimating. Why did I say it's so close to this? I didn't use a calculator. I'm pretty close. How did I know? Ian?
we were looking at how it was in between 49 and 64. It's supposed to be 49.
Because when I look to see what it's between 49 and 64, right, which is really 7 and 8, radical 49 and radical 64 are really 7 and 8. Well, 50 is really close to 49. It'd be about right there. It's between 7 and 8, but it's a lot closer to 7 than it is 8. Let's try another one. Radical 34. I'm going to estimate radical 34 is maybe 5.8. Can someone tell me how I got 5.8? I just guessed. I didn't do it. I mean, like, I don't know, because it's not 5.8, right? I rounded. It's a irrational number. It's irrational. It never ends. It never repeats. That's not the answer. Where does it belong? What's the thought process? This right here is your homework tonight. Estimating using your number line. What can you tell me? Julia.
It's, you said 5.8, you got it between
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. 34 is between what?
the radical of 4, no, 60 and 25.
Where does 34 fit in this line of numbers? 25 and 36. So that means radical 34 is between radical 25 and radical 34, right? Or 36. Does that make sense? All I'm doing is adding a radical sign to it. But I can simplify these because they're in my list. Radical 34 is not in my list, so I cannot make it easier. Radical 34 stays the same, is between, what is the square root of 25?
5.
And what's the square root of 36? If I was going to graph this, you guys, here's 5, and here's 6. Why am I saying it should go about right here? Why am I saying it's closer to 6? know with doing zero math where it belongs? Sam?
34 is closer to 36.
34 is a lot closer to 36 than it is 25. So I'm estimating. Radical 34, it's bigger than 5.5, right? It's closer to 6, so 5.8 is a good answer, or estimate. You try one on your own. You don't have to, write it all out, I guess, but it helps. Let's do radical...
42.
No. 109. Radical 109. What is radical, or what is 109 between? Looking up here, always go back to your list of perfect squares. What is 109 between? Sophia?
100
Okay, so is between 100 and 121. So it's between radical 100 and radical 121. Is that correct? So that means radical 109 is between, what's the square root of 10?
10.
Oops. The square root of 100.
10.
It happens a lot. And what's the square root of 121? 11. Who can tell me, is it going to be closer to 10 or closer to 11? And you have to tell me why. How do you know? Is it right in the middle? Where does it live? Refugio, where?
I say it lives closer to 10 because 109 is closer to 100 than
So like
121.
this close to 10?
No, a bit around right there.
Around right here? Do you guys agree? I mean, again, we're estimating. I would agree. That looks pretty good. Maybe it's an estimate would be 10.3. I'm not using a calculator. I'm just estimating.